I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to start us off with our board reorganization. And the first role that we'll start with is board chair. So I am accepting nominations for board chair.
I nominate Mary Niles.
Who was that? Sorry.
Thank you.
Are there other nominations? Hearing none, we're going to do this by roll because we have Lisa online. So I'm going to ask in favor of Mary Niles as board chair. Lisa?
Yes.
Okay,
And
Miranda?
Kat is on Zoom as well.
Oh, I went right by that. We'll go Miranda,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Arlene.
Yes.
Okay, so moved. So Mary, I'm gonna turn the meeting over to you as
Okay,
board chair.
Thank you.
I just emailed you the rest
Great.
in the line of
I
reorganization.
appreciate it. Thank you so much. And welcome everyone to our first in-person meeting, right? It feels kind of amazing. So then moving forward, the next position is the vice chair. That is currently Emily. She was not able to join, but she is open to continuing in that role if we would like. So I will take nominations for the vice chair position.
I'll nominate Emily.
Okay, thanks, Kat. Any other nominations? Okay, great. So hearing no further nominations, Emily as vice chair. I'll do this by roll. Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Miranda. Great. Okay. Next up is choosing a clerk. And our clerk, who is our current clerk?
The current clerk, I believe, is Erin.
Oh, okay. Erin, would you, are you wanting to continue in that role?
I can, but if somebody else wants to give it a roll, I'm fine with it.
Is there anyone who is really interested in that position? Okay, so I will nominate Erin for clerk. By roll, Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Miranda. Great, thank you, Erin. So next up, we are choosing our supervisory union board representatives. They currently are myself, Kat, and Emily. And Emily has said that she would be willing to step off for someone else to step onto the SU boards. So, Lynn, do we do these nominations one at a time?
You
Or
can
as a
choose to do it that way or all together if there's a whole slate.
slate? Okay. Am I allowed to nominate myself? Okay, so I'm gonna nominate Mary and Kat and Erin for the SU boards. Any other nominations that anyone would like to consider? Okay, by roll, Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mary is a yes, Erin,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Miranda. Great. Okay. So we have a couple of committees on our policy committee currently. Kat and Lisa, how are you all feeling about your role on policy and desire and willingness to continue?
If anyone wants to step up and take on policy,
that would be fine. I wouldn't mind stepping aside, but I also am fine with continuing on with it.
And how about you, Kat?
Same. I kind of came into tonight assuming that I would stay because there hasn't been a lot of interest in the past. So, I'm fine either way.
Okay. Is this of interest to anyone else on the boards? Lynn, can you speak to the time commitments for
So-
policy?
We are almost always about an hour or an hour and a half a month. It's on the second Wednesday at 3:30. Right now, we are having those virtually, and we've committed to remaining virtual through the remainder of the year. Historically, we're in person at Enosburg High School, and we'll consider whether we remain virtual next year or if we go back to in person. We had a rare month this month where we had 2 policy meetings, and that would only ever happen if we had a policy that there was something really timely that we had to push through. But I can't honestly remember the last time we've met twice in a month, so it's pretty minimal. And there's some time to read for reading materials, maybe about an hour in between meetings.
Okay, thank you. Is that of interest, Arlene, Miranda, John? No, not so much. Erin?
I have been on board with that.
Okay. So not a lot of interest from anyone else, so, Kat and Lisa, are you comfortable if I nominate you? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, by roll, Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mary is a yes, Erin,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes,
Miranda, thank you. Okay. The negotiations committee, it's currently myself and John. Are you interested in doing it again?
Yes, I
Okay.
do.
All right, and I am as well. I'm happy doing that. So I will nominate Mary and John to the negotiations committee. Is there, although I want to make sure, is there anyone else who's just dying to be on the negotiations committee? No, okay. By roll, Lisa,
Yes. Sorry.
no problem. Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mary is a yes, Erin,
Yes.
Arlene,
yes,
Miranda, great. Okay, Lynn, I see here superintendent eval committee, but, for the SU board, do we wanna wait to do?
I think that's going to be handled at the SU.
Yes,
level.
okay, I figured so much. So I think just changes to charges. Lynn, these discuss and or make changes to the charges. Can you clarify?
Yep, can you give me 1 second? I tried to get back to that. And
Oh,
it
okay.
seemed to
No problem.
have closed it accidentally. I think you're good until the operational decisions, because you do not have any active committees
Okay,
at
great.
this time.
Okay, great. Okay, so next up is our regular board meeting schedule. So we're currently the first Wednesday of the month at 6:30. And it seems as though it's nice to have the hybrid option available when people need it. Is this, that date, or that time of the month, still working for everyone? First Wednesday? Okay. And Lynn, each of these requires a motion?
Yeah,
Okay, so I'll make the motion to have our board meetings the first Wednesday of each month at 6:30. And we will continue to do our rotation to the various schools. And then we do the 3 winter ones at Enosburg, since it's more central and a little less intense driving wise.
So December, January, February?
December, January, February are at Enosburg, so it's a central location. So that's the motion on the table by roll. Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Miranda, and Mary is a yes. Okay. Next up is scheduling our annual summer board retreat.
So I think you can move past that one because we will reorganize at the SU meeting and we'll choose a date
Okay,
when we're together at the SU level.
okay, that sounds good. Designate places for posting meeting agendas.
For that, it's really, do you want to consider any changes? Are you happy with how things are going at this time and where we're posting?
Yeah, and do you wanna remind everyone where we're posting?
You might need Morgan's help. Town clerks.
Website, our office, I believe we're sending it to all the schools. I think we're sending it to
Post,
town clerks.
town clerks and post offices, or not anymore? We used to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're getting all the post offices.
Okay, but town clerk, yes, and all the schools.
Yeah.
That seems adequate. I mean, I can't really think where else we would post, and then virtually on the websites.
Yes.
Okay, and that requires a motion, Lynn?
Not if,
No.
not unless you want to change it.
Okay, no, I think that's fine. We currently use Robert's rules for small boards. Is everyone feeling comfortable with that kind of guidelines, those guidelines for our board meetings? Okay. And Lynn, I'm not sure what's a motion and what's just a kind of, we're good with it.
Yeah, I think that as you go through these final ones, it's okay to keep moving unless you make a change.
Okay. Discuss and adopt a code of ethics.
Can we come back to that one, Mary?
Sure. Communication practices, we're speaking mostly about everyone using their FNESU emails and such, Lynn?
Yes, and we're also talking about, let me get back to where you are. I think this is also about the talking to the media.
Sure. I mean, and I think that you can probably speak, maybe it's good and helpful to have an overview of kind of when it's appropriate and when it's not, and because a lot of it has to do with chain of
Right.
command too.
So what we have historically done is had the media requests go through the superintendent, and if there's going to be a spokesperson for the board, we would work with the board chair. It's rare. Every once in a while, we'll have something happen, and the media will just be seeking anyone and everyone who will comment. We've had a few experiences this year where we've had media really try to reach out broadly, and I think that all of our board members handled it well because they really weren't circumstances that they had any knowledge about. So I think keeping it centered, I will have the most information about most of the scenarios, and then we'll work with Mary if there's something that needs a board response. If that makes sense.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So Lynn, these last three, board development opportunities and attendance.
So one of the things I just want to make everyone aware of, and I know I've said this every year, and Arlene, you might have missed it last year because you came on board midway. The VSBA is a wonderful support to board members, and they regularly provide you with opportunities. Some of them are in-person opportunities, and one of the benefits of COVID is that they have begun offering more and more virtual opportunities for board members. So Mary and I have a legislative obligation where we have to participate in 8 hours of professional learning together each year. So we do that through typically the VSA, VSBA annual conference. For the last couple of years, we've done that through a virtual conference, so we've been able to do that professional learning together. I encourage all of you to consider participating when those things come up. You do have money in the budget earmarked for board professional learning. So if at any time something comes up and you want to participate, please reach out to my office and Doreen can get you registered for any of those events. Also look for the updates that they send you. As a board member, they give you really valuable information about what's happening at the federal level, if there are any things coming down that you need to be aware of as a board member. And they also give you a lot of information about what's happening in Montpelier during the legislative session and what really could have an impact on your schools and on you as a board member. So remember, those VSBA emails are important to tune into.
Great. Thanks, Lynn.
The
Lynn,
other-
can I just make a quick comment about that they are sent to our personal email, not to our FNESU email?
You know, Lisa, that's a great point because we changed that practice partway through the year. I'll make a note to correct that. Thank you for letting me know. The next is just about statewide education advocacy, and I know that many times when people come onto the board, all the time, when people come onto the board, they're here because they want to make a difference in education. They want to be a part of, you know, the work that we're doing to support our youth. Part of that is, you know, being in tune with what the VSBA and others are sending to you in terms of information. This is just to really remind you of your responsibility as a board member. You act as a board when you are together, but when you are not together, you're acting as an individual, not as a board member. So if you are advocating and you're reaching out at the state level, you know, you can note that you are a board member, but you are advocating personally, not on behalf of the board. And that is perfectly appropriate for you to do, and to pay attention to what's going on and to think about, you know, your response to that and what your thoughts are about that. But just remember that distinction between the two. I know sometimes it gets a little confusing for people who are new to the role. We have not designated a newspaper for notification of meetings in the past. We don't have a particular paper that we use every time.
I'm fine with that. I think we get the word out in lots of other avenues, and I actually think probably the social media and online notifications probably reach more people, although, you know, I don't know what newspaper we would do it that would serve kind of all of our disparate communities, really. But I'm open to it.
For
We
the
just
annual meeting, we use both the messenger and the courier to get the word out.
Yeah.
But I'm probably gonna do that even if you designate one as a specific one, just because.
Well, for the
I'm
annual
sure
meeting, oh, absolutely, but we're talking about our regular meetings, doing one once a,
No, they're just saying it. I mean, you could interpret it that way, but we have not been using
okay.
newspapers to do
Oh,
that.
okay, I
We use those for the
misunderstood.
big special
For the
meetings.
annual meeting and special,
Yes.
absolutely, yeah, we should, I think both of those make sense. They're certainly the most broadly distributed in all the different towns.
Morgan, do you want to walk through the electronic warrants?
Sure. So this was in your packet as well. Our practice is to approve warrants by email. So as we develop them, we are sending them out to everyone. And then we mail checks after we get 2 approvals by email. And so as part of the reorganization, we think the minutes should have a motion to authorize approval of warrants electronically.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll make that motion to approve the warrants electronically. By roll, Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Erin.
Yes.
Arlene.
Yes.
Miranda, and Mary is a yes. Okay. The essential work of school boards video, Lynn, are you going to?
I'm actually not going to show that, but what I'm going to do after this meeting is I'm going to send you all a link
Great.
to the essential work
Yeah.
of school boards video. Mary, there's information that I'm going to send to you as the chair
Sure.
for the VSBA to just make sure you're linked in.
Yep.
Arlene, I may have already done this, but the new school board member toolkit, I'm not sure if I've sent that to you.
Yep.
I have, okay. So I'll send out the other link to everyone. And I'm also gonna say, I'm just gonna own that I forgot the paper copies of the Code of Ethics. So I see them online, but it might be simplest if I email them to all of you and you can look at those.
Sure.
Unless you wanna propose, these are the Code of Ethics that the VSBA has put together. So we've been using the model Code of Ethics for several years. So unless you want to propose looking at something different.
No, I think that's totally adequate. Okay, great. Awesome, we are reorganized.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to. All right, so, next up is our consent agenda. We have the prior minutes. There were quite a few policy readings. Any discussion about the minutes or, any of the policies and changes?
Yes, on policies, Lynn, are we going to have the policies as a slate to approve, or are we going to pull out that one policy that was discussed at the policy meeting?
I think that we typically do it as a slate, and when people have questions or comments on a particular policy, anyone can bring those up. We definitely have one policy in particular that is of interest, I think, that we should talk about as a group. I'm assuming you're talking tuition.
Right, F-32. So I don't know, how do you make that motion, or do we talk about it first, or?
Are you good with taking questions on policy?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's discuss it now,
Okay.
and then we'll move forward with the motion.
Lisa, do you want to take a crack at it, or would you like me to give a summary?
I'll let you summarize, and if it isn't what I was trying to say at the policy meeting, I'll jump back in. Thank you, Lynn.
Okay. Oh, there's pressure. Hopefully I get this right, Lisa. So we have a policy that Enosburg Richford Board had a request for a non-resident student to attend one of their schools and to allow parents to private pay tuition. It isn't something that we have historically done in the past, so the board was uncomfortable with moving anything forward without having a written policy that they could lean on. So Morgan and I were charged with talking with other systems around the state to see, do other people allow parents to private pay tuition? What are some of the considerations? What are the policies that are in place? And what are some things we need to think about? So we took a sample policy that came from another system who does it. They do admit private pay non-resident tuition students to their schools. And there's also there are two parts to this. One is about parent private pay, and the other is about when one system wants to send, and this is the part, Lisa, that I'm not sure if I'm going to get exactly right, but the policy is written in two ways. So it contends with the parent private pay, and it also contends with another system, like if we have an alternative program that they want to tuition their students to within our system. Right now, that's not contemplated, and this would allow that through policy. So in our policy committee meeting, we had a lengthy conversation about whether or not that is an equitable practice to allow families that have the means to pay tuition to go to a different public school outside of their community of origin. So I think that was the crux of the debate at the meeting. What have I missed?
Because these aren't necessarily choice, like we're
They're not
delineating from choice communities
These are
here?
non-choice communities.
Okay, okay.
What's the difference? How far's the town? You know, I'm curious about how this obviously doesn't play out very often.
Well, it doesn't, because it's, right now, we don't have an avenue forward to consider that. So it is a town that has, I really don't want to give specifics because I don't want it to be identifiable.
Sure.
But it's a town that has an agreement where that grade level has to go to a specific school. So that makes them what we would call a non-choice town.
Okay.
So that's a student that doesn't have a choice to pick another school. And
So-
right now, we have public high school choice through Act 129, but that's only for 9th through 12th graders. So when you're not at that grade level, nothing else is contemplated in terms of choice.
Okay.
I was gonna say, in the past, for an example, when I was on the board in Montgomery, there was a family that lived in Westfield that didn't want their student to go to J. Westfield for whatever reason. And so they wanted to send them to Montgomery, and they had offered to pay the tuition rate.
Oh, okay.
This was before they saw what the tuition rate was,
Yeah.
and that tends to end the
Right.
discussion for most parents. But back then and still today, there's no real policy guiding the boards on how to weigh those inquiries as we come in.
It's rare, John, that we get an ask at the board level, but it is not rare for me to get an ask at my level when someone is, oftentimes it's connected to someone being upset about a situation and they want their child to go to another school in response to that. And as Morgan said, typically when they understand how much it costs to educate each child, they do not follow through with the request.
So I just want to add that my objection is to allowing a family, just because the parents can afford to choose to send their child to a different school. I don't feel that that's appropriate in public education. And as for the school choice idea that Act 129 makes possible for high school students, I would certainly love to entertain seeing that at a statewide level, that it could happen for grades K through 8 rather than just 9 through 12. But that has to be, in my opinion, a statewide policy decision that's made by enacting a law. So I feel like there are two issues here, but the issue that it seems that the Enosburg-Richford board is faced with, that they requested this policy for, is specifically a parent who is offering to pay to send their child to a different school just because they want to send their child to a different school. I think from my understanding of the situation, it's a matter of convenience for the family. And I understand that and I sympathize with that, but I'm not sure that opening the door to allowing parents to pay for wherever they want their children to go is going to create an equitable situation for those families that can't afford to do that.
So typically when we bring policies forward, our policies are SU level policies. This policy was taken, it's interesting because it originated at the other district boards meeting and they asked us to bring policy. So for it to become a whole SU policy, it would need to be approved by both district boards and the SU board. So even though we don't typically do this, this board could choose to support this policy or not. They could make a recommendation for amending it in some way. And then the other board could choose to do the same, or they could approve it as a district level policy rather than a supervisory union level policy.
Well, I think in the case of Enosburg-Richford, they do fall under Act 129, so they already are comfortable with this situation. Even though it's not parents paying. So I'm not sure, I can't speak for them. I'm not sure that they're thinking about it in the same way that this board, which is strictly K through 8 board, pre-K through 8 board, would be thinking about this. And it's my recommendation that we ask the policy committee to do more work on this before we approve it. But it's up to the rest of the board to make your decision how you want to vote on this.
So I'm sorry, I'm a little confused because my read on this right now, as what I'm reading, is that this is just saying that we would accept from towns that do not operate a school, which implies choice, not the situation where it's essentially someone kind of with someone of means who has a school available to them but is choosing to send their child elsewhere. I mean, those are the two scenarios.
That was also my question at the policy meeting, Mary, and Morgan provided an answer to that, I wasn't reading it correctly. Is that my understanding, Morgan?
So I think that what the policy states is that in that first paragraph, that you will take tuition students from towns that do not operate a school. That's like bullet 1. And that's something that in theory, we do practice. There aren't that many towns that tuition K through 8 kids, and
Right.
none up here, so it's never been an issue. And then following is sort of an exception to that. So in cases where the district does not pay because they don't have choice, here are the steps that we're going to take. And so we can kind of clarify that to make it clear that the first paragraph is sort of separate from the rest of that policy.
Well, right, and so where is the clause that Lisa is is troubled by? That's what I'm not
So it's that
seeing.
third paragraph is where you're saying the board will allow enrollment by non-resident students, including that are paid by another school district or individual. So that's contemplated.
Oh, so that is implying
where
kind
there
of,
might be a situation where the parent is paying because the district is not.
okay, well, and, I mean, we would really want to flesh out that language, because that's not entirely clear to my read, that's encompassing this unique situation where they have a school available to them, but they're choosing to not have their child attend said school.
Right.
And I find it interesting that Mary had the same interpretation of this policy when she first read it that I had.
I
And
think
then,
it's clearly written.
yeah, that's another reason why I'd like to see the policy committee revisit this before it's approved.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Lisa. This doesn't seem ready for prime time to me. And because it's such a complicated issue, and because it does speak to some of these equity concerns, it seems like there's a little more that's needed to really dive in. So if we can extricate this one policy from the bulk motion tonight, I mean, that would be my choice, that this needs a little more work, because it's a really big decision. Like, it feels pretty consequential, even if it may only be a handful of students here and there, but the precedent that it sets feels somewhat consequential moving forward.
So in particular, you're talking about that third paragraph and making it clearer there that we are talking about both coming into an agreement with another school and accepting the student to be tuitioned from that school to our school, and private pay. Like getting
Right.
clearer on those two distinctions.
Exactly. I mean, and you, Lynn, I think that when we started the conversation, you mentioned that there's some conversation around, like, well, how does this interface then and does it potentially contradict some of our kind of what we're striving for as far as equity, because it then, obviously it's a select group of people of means who would be able to do this out of pocket.
Mhm.
So, and I don't know yet. Like, I'm not sure where I land on how I feel about that, but I'd like a little more time to kind of digest it and think about it. And
One of the things that's happening in Franklin Northeast is we have a few programs that other systems don't have, so we're starting to see more interest in students coming here. So I think it is important that we get it right. So I don't think it's a bad idea to push it back to policy. We have a Flexible Pathways Academy, and that's something that, to my knowledge, there are only 2 in the state, and so we have a fully virtual option for students. So there has been some interest from families, and there are some K through 6 tuitioning towns that could choose to send their students to us for participation in that. And there are also, we have alternative programs, because the programs that we historically used to rely upon through our mental health agency and other alternative programs, there's no space, and those programs have, because of the workforce shortage, we just don't have access to it anymore. So we have developed our own internal alternative programs, and we are starting to hear from other systems about whether or not we're going to consider if we have capacity to take on students outside of FNESU. So I do think we've got to get this right because of what we've built here.
right. I mean, and I suppose it's not dissimilar from our learning, our virtual academy, where we don't we have some families from outside of the SU who are, and we talked about that, like,
Mhm.
if that's a way to generate the revenue to be able to support the program.
I think right now that's all at the high school level.
Right.
And it's all at tuitioning towns.
So, okay, so it's not really kind of it's not kind of falling under this particular umbrella that we're zeroing
Right.
in on. Okay.
And I just have a comment. I think that the policy, I think it did touch on where or as space allows, which if it didn't, it should. But then also when we talk about the flexible pathways, I feel like, is there more room for growth there? But then does that also need to be considered? Like, do numbers need to be considered there if we started letting more people in and then that starts growing? I mean, maybe it just wouldn't get that big, but just wanting to make sure that like it's not getting so big that we couldn't handle it, or that we would end up not having space for our own students in upcoming years, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, Kat, and I think that that's the balance that we have to find. And at the same time, if those are tuition students that are coming in, it's revenue that's coming in that we could use to grow that program at the same time. So I'm totally with you. I would not want us to get into a situation where we're turning our own students away or having a hard time fitting our students in.
Yeah,
And
I would almost want to see it like, worded in a way that like if they're from another district, they need to reapply and be approved on an annual basis, because say there's room this year and then next year we've got 10 more of our own kids that want to join flexible pathways, for example. There may not be room for those same out of district kids anymore. And yeah, wanting to give first dibs to our kids. So
Well, and it does say that, I just read that somewhere in here, that it is on a year by year basis, and that admission for 1 year is not a guarantee for subsequent years.
okay, good.
So, any other discussion for now?
I just had a question for Lynn. Lynn, you were going to reach out to the AOE on this. Did you get any response?
I have not yet, Mary.
Okay.
Sorry, Lisa.
It's okay.
Morgan, you had something?
I just had a quick question, since I'll probably get pulled into some of the rewrite work on this. Is the issue around the clarity and making it clear that there's a difference between kids from tuition towns and private pay kids? Or is the issue that the board is not interested in the private pay kids? Or is that still to be fleshed out?
Well, it sounds to me like the former,
Mhm.
but then that there is, some discussion maybe to be had around like, does
Okay.
it raise any equity concerns?
Okay.
And, I think at some point we'll wanna dive into that conversation, so maybe if there's a kind of a rewriting of the language and then we could kind of flush it out at the next meeting or whenever it makes sense next. Anyone else have thoughts on it? Okay. So with that said, I think that what I'm gonna do is make a motion to accept both the prior minutes and the policies except for F32 admission of non-resident tuition students K through 12. By roll, Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
and Mary is a yes. Okay. Lynn, do you have a need to reprioritize the agenda?
I
Or
do
does anyone
actually.
else? Okay.
So people understand, we have to build these agendas a week and a half before every board meeting. So there are times where things come up after we've warned our agenda. So I've actually asked Michelle Irish to come under my other to talk about an equity audit. So I would love to move her to right after public comment
Great.
or the schools. Do you have anyone here for your school spotlight?
No.
Okay. I didn't want to make anyone else wait.
Okay. So we'll have Michelle go right after public comment. Okay, perfect. That sounds good. And Lenny, you're okay with that? That works for you.
She can go first.
I'll stop coughing on all of you if I get going.
Okay, great. That sounds good. So for our visitors, public comment, there's no one in the room and no one on
The
Zoom.
two on Zoom both said that they didn't have anything specific for the board. They were just watching.
Okay, very
Did you
good.
get names?
And they've left. So
Did you get names for them, Morgan?
yes.
Oh, they're no longer with
No,
us.
but they were
They don't
both
seem
from
to
my
be-
school, so.
Okay.
I saw
They seem to
that.
be-
All right.
Page.
Okay, great. Well, then we're moving on. And that brings us to you, Michelle.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
So, as Lynn said, we have an
Michelle, can
opportunity.
you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm
and your
sorry,
role,
yes,
just
I
to-
don't know everybody here. So I'm Michelle Irish, I'm the Director for the Advancement of Educational Equity here in Franklin Northeast, so I work out of the Superintendent's office. My role was new in July, so I'm actually back in the district. I was here 16 years ago as a special ed director and then went into did some private school stuff and I'm now back, happy to be back.
And 27 years ago at Montgomery Elementary School, next door to me.
Right, we taught together, we taught side by side. So, we have recognized a real need to get a handle on our equity data in this district. So, one of the things that has kind of prompted this are the board goals that came out, in the last SU meeting. Really recognizing the fact that we have 3 goals that are asking us to ensure that all students are meeting these specific goals. And in order to do that, we really feel like we need to get a better sense of what our equity data is telling us. And it's a pretty monumental task to kind of dig into all of that. So we have an organization that we're gonna be working with to start to collect that data, unpack it, and then find out sort of where are our gaps, where are we doing things well, what can we build on, and how are we gonna move forward over the next 5 years to ensure that we're meeting those board goals. So I have a quick, I think it's a 4-minute sort of a presentation from the company that we're working with. Their name is Insight Education Group, and they are all educators, former educators who are now really focusing on doing this equity consulting work. And we're gonna be in probably a 6 to 8 month cycle with them. And so I have a quick sort of video of that, and then I have a couple handouts that I can share as well, that give you the process, and then I'll take questions. Lenny, do you have that
I
video?
shared it with Morgan.
Morgan, do you have that video?
I have a slideshow. Is that what you sent me?
No, it should be a video.
There should be a
Did I
video.
send you the wrong one?
No,
I got
no,
a
you sent me the
message from
correct
Morgan.
one. It was a video. I clicked on it. I sent you a slideshow, but I just sent you moments ago when I realized, oh, he might need to be the one presenting.
Got it.
Thank you.
He's still my.
So the woman who's going to be doing the presentation is our lead consultant will be working with over the next several months. And the reason I'm here tonight is because that work's going to start immediately, and so I really wanted to get this information to you first. The leaders, we kind of shared it with them to some extent, and then we want to get it out to our faculty as well, so everybody is aware of what's going on. That's 2 points.
You want to try this?
Yep.
I think you can make it full screen too when you scroll over down. Yeah, there you go.
Uh-oh. I can't hear it.
It's muted.
Do we have speakers? Is that fun?
Only if there's a VGA carry full sound and image.
No,
Right.
but he's only VGA.
He could tell me. I don't know what he plugged in over there. The sound did work on mine.
No, that was Lenny.
I wanted to take a moment to insight education first. We are all practitioners in our district experience and now work with many places networks.
Just mute
There are
that.
quite a lot of extras.
I don't understand. So I'll stick it up here first.
Oh, that's great.
So while they're while they're working out the sound issue, I think one of the things I just want to say about the equity audit is I think that it is known that we have had a couple of incidents within FNESU that were connected to racial comments, and these have been opportunities for us to really learn and grow, and I think that we certainly have had this work on our radar for a while and we're committed to the equity work, and at the same time this felt like the first opportunity where our community has really, we've struggled with this. This has been something that has been hard to navigate as a community, and it's been hard to navigate with the narrative that has been placed on our community. The incidents occurred. It isn't representative of who we are as a community or what we want for our students. So this opportunity to really look at our equity data in order to drive the action steps that we need to take as a community for our students, for our families, our community members, engaging other members of other groups within our community. This is an opportunity for us to learn from this moment and from our data and take this as a starting place to really accelerate the progress we're hoping to make in terms of making everyone feel that deep sense of belonging, the safety, the respect, and the ability to be proud of who they are and where they go to school. So
Thank you.
it's one of our motivating factors of moving forward with this work.
A question while we're waiting for that.
Sure.
So I know that like we would dig deep into the data and that's gonna take time, but are there action steps to start that work now? Like it's very clear that that work needs to start now. And I know you work hard to be intentional at it, but I just feel like if we wait, it also sends a very strong message too. So I'm just wondering.
There's actually a lot of work that's already happening.
Okay.
So this is part of the work that Michelle's been doing this year, and we're in year 3 of doing some of this work. And I think that what hasn't happened is the community engagement piece in this work, and it's really evident from what we have experienced that's a needed step and not a step that we should push off any longer. So this is a real opportunity for us to engage others, and it seems as though there's a willingness to engage in these conversations.
And Morgan, if we can't get the video, I can share it out over email tomorrow or later on tonight, and just kind of give a summary, the best I can without having in front of me. But
Looking at the video, it seems to be an issue with the audio.
okay.
I don't want to.
Well, it seems like one of these computers is picking it up and broadcasting it again, and that's kind of the issue.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try it again.
Weird.
It's weird. Yeah.
Huh.
And I think we've been doing the PD. Was it last year too? Around the DEI work, so there
Last
is
2 years.
yeah,
2
last
years.
year. So there has been some starting at the teacher level, and then it's the question of how does that come down to the student level, and then how does it come down to the community level.
There's definitely been work at the student level. It not as much work as we want, but we have definitely
Not as
seen
universal.
a pretty fair amount of work happening at all levels. We just haven't gotten to the community part yet. Much more to do. Like there's
We have
It's definitely gonna be
DEI
a journey.
teacher leaders in each school that are
Each
part of the
building,
team.
yeah.
They're doing work with
Yep.
you.
So we do have between 2 and 4 really in every building who have volunteered to sort of be the point people in their building to support this work. So just to give you a quick synopsis, this year we did some internal audit work where we've been looking at the kind of topics of representation and belonging for this year. And so those building leaders have helped me craft a survey that we just delivered over during in-service. And then we had a series of faculty conversations on the same day, really diving into what does belonging look like, who matters here, how do we know, how do people feel like they have a sense of belonging, and what does that look like for us. So that data is also, we're gonna be working with that a little more deeply in the next couple of months with the leaders and then with building-based people. This work was intentionally designed to be an external look at us so that we have someone else kind of looking under the covers a little bit and figuring out sort of what are we blind to? What are we missing? Because it's really easy when you're sitting in it to not see it, or to think it's not there, or it's not there in ways you don't expand. So the audit itself is going to be couched in these 5 categories, and you'll see that when we get the video. I can't rattle them all off right now because this is really new work for us, but they'll be doing surveys that'll start this spring with stakeholders. So there'll be surveys for faculty, for leaders, for high school students. We'll be surveying high school students as well, and community members and parents. And then I'm going to be working on starting to collect a tremendous amount of the data that we already have access to. So a lot of our information from Howard School, achievement data, a lot of the stuff that we already sort of
discipline data.
Things that we are looking at, curriculum, kinds of data, and sending that to them as well. And then in the fall, they'll come back, and once we have people return to school, we'll be doing stakeholder focus groups. So again, the same kinds of stakeholders will be engaging in some focus groups. So we're gonna have the quantitative data that, is just right there and we'll look at it. We're also gonna have people's lived experience data. So we'll see, do they match? Does what we think about our discipline match our actual practice? And so we'll have a lot of good information to show that. The report will be broken down by those different domains, and it'll come with research behind why it's important to look at that domain, and also some recommendations for moving forward. So it's going to give us a lot of really good information. And I agree with you, Erin, we aren't gonna stop on the wait. We're gonna keep moving forward. We've got some work planned for the summer for the building level equity folks to engage in some pretty impressive professional development, and also to be working on this multi-year plan. We're gonna start from the data we've already collected and move forward from there, so. So this I'll keep talking. Tell me if to stop it if something shows up. The roadmap that I sent you is just sort of a summary of what it's gonna look like over the next several months. So the dates are a little bit flexible. I just got this today. Our plan is to have a tangible report in hand by the 1st of December. So if all things go well and we hit all our milestones between now and then, that we should expect that to be ready for us in December.
And Michelle, this is at every single school.
It's going to be district-wide
Yeah.
with one report. So
Okay.
we wanted to really focus on, looking at the district as a whole. There will be stakeholders from every town and every
And
school.
ER is doing it as well.
It's
So
and I'll be
SC
going to see them next week.
Great,
at the
okay.
next meeting.
Great.
Though I would have brought this to the supervisory union board, but we need to start the work before that meeting happens.
Oh, sure.
So we didn't want to wait, and I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that it got out to all of you in a timely way.
So we're gonna try this one more time.
Okay.
About an equity audit we will be conducting in Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union. I wanted to take a moment to introduce you to Insight Education Group. We are all practitioners who have school and district experience and now work in many places nationally to support equity work. It is important to us that we continue to do equity work in our own organization, that we align districts' equity work with other ongoing bodies of work in their organization, and that we develop strong partnerships with district stakeholders so all members of the organization see themselves as important contributors to the work on equity. This graphic introduces Insight Education Group's equity framework. The framework is organized around 5 domains. Domain 1 is structures, systems, and resources, and speaks to the work of the central office in terms of things such as strategic planning and resourcing through a lens of equity. Domain 2, culture and community, addresses important aspects such as students' perceptions of their school experiences, how welcoming schools in the district are to families, and how schools are attending to students' social and emotional needs. Domain 3 speaks to the work that districts do to ensure equity in the workforce. As you can see on the slide, we focus on 4 specific aspects: recruitment, retention, placement, and advancement opportunities. In Domain 4, we turn our attention to opportunities for all staff members in the organization to have the opportunity for professional learning and personal growth where equity is concerned. Our final domain is curriculum, instruction, and learning, which studies several aspects of equity, including curriculum, instructional practices, and whether all students have equitable access to advanced classes and enrichment opportunities. This slide speaks to the equity audit process specifically. As you can see, we have 3 main streams of work: document review and practice, stakeholder engagement, and quantitative data review. The items on these lists are merely examples of the types of data that we review. We will work closely with Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union staff members to determine the artifacts and stakeholder groups that should be considered in order to develop a comprehensive understanding of the district and its progress in providing equitable access and opportunities to all students. The robust data collection you see here allows us to fully understand the assets in place in the district as well as areas for growth. All the data we collect and review culminates in a comprehensive written report. The report provides an overview of Franklin Northeast's context and our methodology during the audit. Next, we provide a discussion for each of the 5 domains I shared a few moments ago. For each domain, we will provide an overview of associated research. We will then write a narrative of the findings, citing applicable data points from our study, including quotes and statistics from our surveys. Finally, we provide recommendations based on our findings. It is important to note that when we cite information gathered during stakeholder feedback, we do everything to ensure participants' confidentiality and no names are shared during the report. Thank you so much for your time and attention during this informational session. We are looking forward to working with you and the rest of the community in the Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union during the equity audit process.
Questions?
not so much a question, but I'm just a comment that I think this is a great endeavor, and I'm really pleased that we're taking this kind of big picture look and getting, I think, this kind of outside, unbiased kind of perspective is really important. It's hard to self-audit.
It's very hard, and it's something that I've been wanting to do since I started. Like, that was one of the first things I thought we're gonna need to accomplish. And the longer I've been here, the more I've realized how hard that would be to do internally. Even just getting the part that we did do for in-service was a huge lift on a lot of people.
Yeah.
And this is gonna be so much more efficient and give us so much more comprehensive look that I think it's gonna be
Great. And do you kind of envision that you'll check back kind of regularly with an update, or just kind of at the end of the process in a big
It's a good
presentation?
question. So, as you saw on the roadmap, there's some benchmarks. So, I'll be spending the next several weeks really collecting the data we currently have and submitting that. And I'm sure as they start to review it, they're going to be prompting me with some other things we might be able to offer. Then they won't be returning data to us until the end in the report. So the stakeholder data, we won't see the results of that as it's happening, and we won't participate. Like, I won't participate in those focus groups or those stakeholder meetings, only to ensure that it's really truly an external view, so that we're not influencing or being part of that. So I don't know that I'll have much to offer until the end. We'll be continuing our own work internally as well. And one of the things I'm hoping to do is, as we sort of decide what data needs to be collected, we're going to be working with the programs that we have through Power School and EduClimber to ensure that we can collect that data on a regular basis and ongoing, so that we're kind of being able to match what we do now in the future. So that's going to be some work that we'll be doing partly.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes, thank you for letting me go first.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Take
yes.
care, Michelle. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Could we switch the order, maybe to Morgan?
Oh, sure. Lenny needed a minute. Okay, so Morgan, you want to?
Sure, I actually don't have that much for you. I sent your March financial report out by email about 2 hours ago. So that'll be waiting for you when you sign on from home. Obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions offline as well. And you will not yet see second semester tuition bills hitting that report yet. It's really big order I'm still waiting for. You already took care of warrants under reorganization, and so I have one other, and that is around approving some more capital reserve projects. So last month we talked about some projects at Montgomery and Bakersfield coming up, and you gave us authority to tap into capital reserves for those if needed. And I say if needed because we try to get as much into the general fund as we can each year. These are ones that are either likely to exceed what the general fund can handle this year, or those bills may not come in until after July 1, and then they came to the general fund for those. So we covered those for the 2 schools. I am bringing a list to you tonight for the other 2 schools, which I am hoping you will approve as well. Again, for all of these, we are also looking into grant funding for these projects where we think we can secure them. That's a moving target right now. Generally, in the past, we've been able to find money for things that fall under security or fall under HVAC, but it seems to be quite a moving target. And Lauren and I and your principals are all kind of keeping eyes out to see when we can get somebody else to pay for some of these. And so the projects I'm bringing to you tonight for your approval are one in Berkshire, and that is to install an automatic transfer switch for their generator. Each of the schools has a generator. They tend to be owned by the town because of how they were purchased. and the schools are all emergency shelter sites. What we have in Berkshire is sort of ineffective and unsafe way where to switch the building over to generator power, and that somebody has to go and kind of pull the big Frankenstein lever by hand to do that. And so we would like to move forward and install a switch that when the power goes out here, it'll switch over automatically, and that's going to require a few changes to the building where the generator is housed as well, because it will turn on and we'll have somebody actually there to open the doors and vent all the gas out. At this time, that's the only thing we have in Berkshire. We do know that boiler replacements are on the short-term horizon. It may be 2 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, but at this point, it's not going to be this summer. And then in Sheldon, we've got a handful of projects. We talked about in the past making some changes to classroom walls in order to add a second pre-K classroom there, as well as to add a second third grade classroom there. Miranda did a walkthrough with Christina and Vern, and we can talk about the ideas that we're going forward with if folks are interested. That's all work that is going to be done over the summer when kids are not in the building. They've got 2 security projects that we were hoping to be able to slip into the construction project just concluded, but there was not enough money for that. So one would be to install additional cameras in areas where we need it in the building, and then the other one is to install a badge system like this so that we've got ways to basically shut people out of the buildings rather than have a bunch of physical keys floating around in town. And then the last project in Sheldon that we're bringing forward tonight is the temperature controls, similar to what we're doing in Montgomery and in Bakersfield, to upgrade and automate those.
And what kind of numbers are we looking at?
So the Berkshire one I think is going to be around 10,000. Lenny can tell me I'm wrong if he thinks so.
Can you ask that question again? I got distracted.
The
ADHD.
transfer switch.
I actually just got a quote for it. Look at
All right.
that. I can pretend like I'm on the ball here. Vern just sent me a quote for the transfer switch, $12,000, and that did not include digging by others. So that was for electrical permit inspection, the conduit switch, replace existing manual transfer switch, material, labor to install, and based on 7 to 5 hour schedule.
So call that 12 to 15, depending on what this trench is going to cost, which was news earlier today. In Sheldon, the badge system and the cameras are both in the 12 to 13,000 range. The temperature controls would be 20, and the classrooms, we think to do both are going to be around 45,000. Going to be getting some more quotes on that, but the first one that we got in came in at that level. Again, for all of these, depending on how tuition kids sugar off in the next month, we'll try to get some, if not all of them, into the general fund. We will not have the classrooms in Sheldon done by June 30th. We're confident of that. Some of the security work we could probably get billed and at least started for summer. And then I think the control work is starting at least in Bakersfield and Montgomery, April break.
And you need a motion to approve the projects.
To approve using capital reserve money for those.
Yeah. And just to clarify, the capital reserve monies that you're talking about, we're not talking about the pots of money that some of the schools came to the merged district with.
We're talking about both.
Okay.
So we're going to use up those individual ones first,
Yeah.
and then tap into that district level.
Okay.
Good question.
All right. I mean, none of it sounds like fluff. It all sounds necessary and needed, in my estimation.
Yep,
And
Vern is making a long list and we're just bringing the mission critical
Yeah.
ones to you first.
great. Any other questions for Morgan about these expenses?
What was the total for Sheldon? Just because I.
So Berkshire, I would say that we, probably for the motion, we're gonna need the names of the projects
Okay.
rather than the dollar amount, so for Berkshire, it would be the,
I've got the names.
generator transfer switch, okay?
Just didn't have the names.
You need us to, kind of enumerate each one.
Just list out those 5 projects, so basically when the auditors are looking at the capital reserve funds being spent, you can go and say, April 6th, they said we could use the capital reserve for the transfer switch.
So the transfer
Transfer
switch,
switch in Berkshire,
yeah,
classroom modifications in Sheldon, badge system and cameras in Sheldon, and temperature controls in Sheldon.
and there was what was the Montgomery one?
Those you approved last month. They were.
Oh, okay, that's okay. I was just, so it's kind of four, well, the cameras and the badges because they're kind of security upgrades.
Right.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna make the motion to approve the, using capital reserve funds for the following projects: the transfer switch in Berkshire, the classroom modifications in Sheldon, the cameras and the badge security upgrades in Sheldon, and the temperature control in Sheldon. By roll, Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Miranda, and Mary is a yes.
And that is all I have for you tonight.
Okay, great, thanks Morgan. So Lenny, you're up with your spotlight then?
Yeah, can you present the PowerPoint, Morgan? And then take care of it from there and I'll just sit and listen. If only it were that easy.
Can you make that any bigger, Morgan? Oh, that's much better. That's good.
So Rhoda and I kind of tag teamed the school spotlight at the beginning of the year. I think it was September's board meeting. So we said, or I said, I think I don't know if this is the plan for your school spotlight coming up that you were going to talk about this or something else, but we definitely said we were going to come back to you. So this is my coming back to you around our restorative practices work and implementation for this year. Since we do have some new board members, I think it would be good to go through a quick refresher of some of the things I talked about or we talked about last time, and then give you an update on what was planned for this year, and then sort of what ended up kind of coming to fruition because of A, B, and C challenges, and kind of what we learned on the way. Next slide, please. So kind of the first thing I talked about is why I do restorative practices, and the phrase that's kind of fun to say is the universal practice that impacts our school universally. And restorative practices is a whole lot more stuff than just simply circles, which I think became kind of the simplified understanding that some people might have had in different places or other experiences in other schools. It's really about a way of thinking, a way of being, a way of doing, and a way of problem solving. And if you look through all of those terms, it also connects well to the social emotional learning focus that is something we need to get better at as an SU, and it is an SU priority. And if you could imagine if all of our students were able to gain all of these skills, how much more effective they would be as learners and how effective the school would run and the climate and community of the school. So this is not just about the learners, though. It's about teachers learning to also continue to have these things and build these things with our students. And one of the things that is going to be a tremendous opportunity moving forward is as our students teachers become more competent and capable and confident as restorative practitioners, they're going to be more effective in delivering social emotional learning. It's one of those natural conduits for that social emotional learning instruction that we need to do in many different ways. And I'll talk a little bit more about some opportunities that we've already uncovered over the course So, actually, you can skip this slide because I have a quicker summation on the next one. Yeah, so actually it was kind of funny that my school spotlight came on the same day that Michelle was going to be here, because there's a really natural, one of the words I like to use is braiding of social emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, equity, and restorative practices. They all feed off of each other and support each other. And one of the things that it says on the slide is about how equity is increased through restorative practices as you increase connectedness for students. And that phrase that she used about sense of belonging and sense of connectedness is kind of one of those key words. It's the big focus of doing restorative practices and creating that positive climate in the classroom and then throughout the whole school. And also the piece around building healthy relationships. And we've been diving into some of that in some of our classrooms about how to be a successful community, how to handle when things don't go appropriately for you. It's kind of a guidepost for how to do all these instructions, but also how to build kids' individual capacity so they can problem solve some of these things. And so we don't always need to have teachers right there being like, this is what you did wrong, this is what you did wrong, how are you going to fix it? And there are structured mediated conversations teachers will get more and more capable in, and other staff members as well. But ideally we get to the point where maybe the students understanding we are connected, we are part of a community, something happened to me by you that doesn't feel good, how can I problem solve that with you? So research shows that restorative practices has many different positive impacts on the school. It's going to reduce teacher burnout and compassion fatigue as students feel more connected, they can make better choices, they can more effectively express their feelings and problem solve around those feelings. Teachers are going to feel more skillful at responding to aberrant student behavior as well. Or classroom's environment is going to be a place that's more conducive to learning, so they're not going to be struggling with classroom management as much. Then it integrates the social emotional learning and mindfulness, and it's going to improve school safety again through that increased relationships and increased connectedness of all students in that and all individuals in that space. It serves a need of challenging and marginalized youth, although I will point in later on about how there's some interesting extinction bursts that occur through some of this circle work and through some of these restorative practices, which actually just reveals just how deep some wounds and some needs are in some of our communities and in some of our students. By communities, I mean classrooms. But this serves the needs of them because it recognizes that piece of how do we help those friends who feel like they don't belong in school, either from historical family views of school or experiences they have outside of school that they carry into school, or just history of experiences based on the behaviors that manifest in school, causing them to lose a connectedness with their peers. How can we undo that so they can feel connected in school? And then, of course, increase deeper learning relevance as students are feeling more able to engage with school and they feel like this is the place for them rather than a place that is done to them for 8 hours. We can skip this one. That was one I carried over from last time. It's and the kind of the summary of that one is how, just like social emotional learning, it's almost like they're all mean the same thing in some ways. But restorative practices, if it's a universal thing that everyone's doing well and students are getting skills from it, it's going to increase their capacity and resilience to overcome a lot of things in life, struggles, interpersonal struggles, own emotional struggles, and then academic struggles. It will come down to a lot of those kind of building those social emotional skills such that they can be successful in navigating not only school but then outside of life as well. And so this slide kind of summarized what Berkshire and Bakersfield had done up to this year. I'll speak a little bit to our side. So we collaborated with the Franklin Gray Dow Restorative Justice Center to develop a multi-year plan. And actually some of those people came on and created their own new holistic partners in restorative change. Is that the name that they had? No, I can remember it. Which is why we ended up kind of consulting with them for this year, that they made their own kind of system and their own business that kind of focused on this. So we started with them a few years ago. We partnered with them again for the following year with some consultation and 3 full staff PD trainings and a little bit of support with the beginning stages of creating a restorative practices leadership team. And that continued into 2021. And then, so at the end of 2021 is when we realized we did need a more kind of dedicated, focused consultant working with us. And they let me know that they had this plan for this organization that was going to focus on implementing restorative practices in school from a systematic plan. And I thought that was something that would really make sense for our school, as we know that there's a lot of work needed done to do this well. And the flip side of that, doing this not well has really detrimental effects to the community, to the culture, and to the staff morale. So I continue to be mindful of like how can we make sure it's always moving forward in a I feel more competent, I feel more effective way of implementing this change, on top of all the other things we're trying to get teachers to do. So being mindful of that and having a consultant to really help us go at exactly the right pace for our staff. And that's leads into the next slide. So what we had learned, as I said, is that schools need systems in place in order to sustain those practices, that ongoing training is essential from highly skilled, capable individuals to do that training. Many schools are doing this work and we can hopefully learn from each other. And then student leadership is an important part of the RP process, and students need opportunities to use their voice. And this work ties into so much in the other work that we're doing, such as social emotional learning, equity, mindfulness, multi-tiered systems of support, trauma-informed practices, all of the wonderful words. And they all, yeah, like I said before, they all kind of mean the same thing, but they're just, it's really, some of these things aren't like, you can't just totally write a book. It's a mindset that you then deliver into a problem. It's not necessarily, hey teacher, if A, then B. It's more like you have some understandings and some perspectives and some philosophies, and then how can you think about applying them into a situation? And that is really hard for teachers to do, not because they're not skilled, but it's just a really hard thing to do. And some people are more fluent in doing social emotional learning without needing a lot of guidance for it. But I know most teachers would say when they're asked, do you do social emotional learning? They might be like, maybe, yes. And then when they're asked, like, how do you teach this skill? And they try and sit down and say, here's how I'm going to teach friendship, or how I'm going to teach problem solving. And it's so much harder than it seems like at first glance compared to, which is also very hard, about how to teach fractions per se. And there's not a lot of training that has gone into this. And this is something we're being mindful of doing in the future. And I see restorative practices and our continued consultation as being one of the really powerful ways to provide that training to build teacher skills and capacity to do and deliver social emotional learning. So then we talked about, Rhoda and I talked about like how can we create restorative schools that sustain themselves over time, because that is one of the goals in partnership with the holistic partners in restorative change. I'm going to get that dialed in at some point. Is their goal is not to be glommed onto us forever. Their goal is to consult with us to build our capacity such that they are no longer needed. Each year I work with them though, we find out there's just so much more work than we thought. They're like, from 3 years ago, we're like, we're gonna do a 3-year plan, and then we got to like point 1 of year 1 of the 3-year plan. And even this year, as I talk more in the coming slides, there was a lot of, not necessarily promise, but a lot of like, here's what we're definitely gonna get into, and then we realized we need to go much slower than that in order to be effective. And then how do we make restorative practices more than something we do, but rather who we are and the way we approach our work? And that's kind of that piece of, if you're a restorative practitioner, you come across a situation that isn't going well, how can you apply your restorative practices, mindsets, and skills? And maybe there are some tips and tricks that you learn along the way to problem solve that situation, whether it's with another adult, with students, your whole classroom, or have the two students among themselves. So the next few slides at the top is going to be one of the goals that we had put in place for year 1. And what I'm going to talk about is sort of what we accomplished relative to that goal, what our next steps are. And some of these goals we recognize are things that need to pause. And I'll preface at the beginning that, and I really want to make it at some point a banned phrase, but because of COVID. And we thought the start of this year was going to be normal. And it wasn't, in a lot of different ways. And just the context of what we've gone through these last 2 years and the context of what we've gone through this year, but it seems like hopefully maybe...
Don't say it out loud.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not going to finish that sentence,
have
but we
wishes.
know what I'm going to manifest it without necessarily saying it. Like bandwidth for teachers, capacity for staff, staff being present. These things kind of got in the way of simply even meeting as a restorative practice team. So our first restorative practice team meeting, we couldn't occur until December. So that, among many other things, we kind of realized we're going to, again, go slower than we initially planned. But what I appreciate with our consultant is they're going to be working with us at our pace rather than being like, this is how we do things. And that's, I think, going to lead to a lot of positive wins for everybody. So the leadership team has been meeting. So actually, I'll start at the top. One of the goals, setting up infrastructure for the work, which means having created a dedicated restorative practice team, increase school leaders, those restorative practice team members, understanding of restorative approaches, and identify community partners. We didn't do too much on the community partner side, but that's because all the other stuff took plenty of time. So in the 4 meetings that we've had so far, we've learned about, we've been presented to and start our own learning on balancing the process, which I'll ask Morty to click on that link in a moment, doing check-ins, introducing the asset needs and assessment process, which is going to be really great for data-driven school improvement, and there's going to be a lot of tie-over and crossover with some of the equity audits. So we're kind of, one of the many reasons we're pausing on doing that is I also want to see how this equity audit's unfolding, what data we get from that, because we don't want to do something redundant, and we also just want to make sure we're working together and supporting each other and not also overly assessing people or schools. They also learned about something called the UAI framework, and then our next session for the restorative practice leadership team is going to be around trauma and trauma-sensitive transitions. So I want to talk a little bit about the 2 links that I have in there. Maureen, can you click on the first link, Balancing the Process?
I don't know what's going to happen.
I think if you click on it, it's going to magically do exactly what it's supposed to do. I'm winning left and right here right now. Can you hit Control Plus? Let's see if this works. Yeah, a couple more times. That's you, cheater. It was more fun my way. Can you scroll down a little bit? I'm not going to have you read all this. If you are interested, I can share these materials if you want to kind of deep dive into them. Keep going, keep going. So until you can see that full circle diagram. So I think this piece and then the UAI framework are kind of 2 opportunities I have to present to you about how to show to you how restorative practices can impact all the different ways that teachers interact with students and students interact with each other. So the framework around the balance in the process is kind of 4 steps. This can apply to when you have a meeting. We could have technically done this when we have had this meeting today, and it does actually have some profound effects. But when your meeting has multiple topics or multiple focuses, it might get a little hard to do this. But basically, there's kind of 4 steps during a interaction per se. There's the checking and connecting step, where that comes back to that human element of like, can we both get ourselves to recognize we need to be here, we need to be calm, we need to be centered and be ready to have a conversation. And then there's the relationship building piece. Then there's an issue or topic that you're going to focus on. And then there's attention or agreement setting. And we weren't totally transparent. I'm going to circle back to my restorative practice team about this, because we were kind of just learning about this. And I think a disconnect we even had then at the restorative practice team was they were kind of like, okay, we're learning this high-minded stuff. And I kind of recently realized like, oh, wait, this is what you could be doing every single time you're dealing with a student behavior, a choice that didn't work out well, or when 2 students are interacting with each other. And sometimes you may not even realize that you're organically doing this. And I don't just mean as a teacher, it could be my wife and I organically might actually be going through this. But it's also important to recognize how effective this can be when it comes to problem solving, particularly when there's an actual, like, you feel strongly one way or the other, or you feel harmed in that situation. If you're not regulated, and I'm speaking maybe romantically at the moment, if one of us isn't regulated, we're not going to have a very productive conversation between my wife and I. So how do we go about checking and connecting before we have that conversation? Sometimes that means she goes upstairs to take a nap and I go work out, and then we both have got ourselves regulated so that we can have a conversation. And then when you go to have that conversation, you need to, again, connect with that person and recognize we have a relationship that matters. I'm thinking about how we want to repair that. Then you identify the issue, and then you come about problem solving it. If teachers engage in these 4 steps effectively, I can't imagine how quickly students are going to improve their behavior and understand how to be more successful in class. Perfect opportunities for this, but again, this would be really hard to do, is when a student has had to access maybe the thinking spot, the buddy room, or the planning room. We try to, as a school, do some of these things, but I wouldn't even pretend that any of us is super fluent of it, especially starting at the checking and connecting part. When you come and meet with that student at the thinking spot, or when they come back from the buddy room, or when they come back from the planning room, the 2 of you pause and do a check-in, make sure you're both truly regulated and connected and feel like we are a working partnership and we both agree we want to be successful here. Have a positive relationship first and then go into problem solving the issue. I could only imagine how much more likely that student is to not repeat that concerning behavior. And then you can blow that up to a classroom dilemma, and have this kind of similar conversation where you might sit down and do a whole class check-in, relationship building, let's talk about an issue, let's problem solve around it, come up with an agreement, and then we'll check in on how we did on that agreement later on in the day. So this was kind of one of the first things we talked about, and I think even on me, I was like, why? I like this, but I wasn't really seeing how this applied to us as teachers specifically. But the more I've kind of looked at and thought about it, I'm like, oh my God, there's a lot of training in all 4 of those steps that I really want my teachers to gain, and have a mindfulness of when you are engaging with a student, and then again, at some point having students to themselves, how can we actually make this the way we go about problem solving some student behaviors in an effective time that doesn't take 25 minutes, when 25 minutes might not necessarily be necessary. But that's the other piece. As a teacher, this is hard to do. So that was one piece of deep learning that I'm like, imagine if, how much, and again, what's cool about this is this may not land in any one of these little conversations between teacher and student, or student and student, or teacher and class. You could put any social emotional learning thing in there, and sometimes this would be social emotional learning that didn't land on your like scope and sequence that you're going to do. But imagine how much social emotional learning can be done if we were implementing this practice with regularity with all of our students. Bounce back to the presentation and click on the UAI framework. And the same thing, zoom in until our tired eyes feel comfortable. So an underpinning of the UAI framework is, again, this balance in the process. And then can you scroll down a little bit? Keep going. Keep going. Until like, yeah, maybe one more down, like one more tab. Yeah, you're fine, sorry. I was thinking.
You want him to go back?
I kind of just want to see that person, where the person was. Like, I don't want to have that be kind of center of the screen. Yeah, that's good enough. So again, similar thing happened to me, and I would suspect the team is this was another kind of like philosophical learning piece that we had we had some deep conversations on, and I don't think we recognized how profound this approach again could be, or how many different opportunities you can to utilize this sort of mindset. So the UAI framework is an acronym for understanding, and then awareness and intention. And this is talking about the first piece is that understanding. What do you know about the student's capacity, skill, and motivation at play in a situation? So there's a situation that is not going well for, this could be any type of thing, or it could be a classroom situation too. Maybe the classroom's capacity, skills, and motivations could also be underpinning why something's not going the way you want to. So that first piece is, as a teacher, we need to be mindful of our understanding of those either deficits or strengths they have in a situation. And then the next step, when you're about to engage in problem solving it, is that awareness piece. What do you bring to the situation that influences our motivation, capacity, and skill? And again, this can come to that piece of, so what are you bringing into that conversation? What are you, with the group of students or the whole class, that could be either negatively impacting this problem solving, or could be used as a leverage to help this out? And then intention, given our understanding and awareness, how we respond and work to build the student's skill, capacity, or motivation. So this is kind of another lens, a problem-solving lens, that you want to have as a restorative practitioner when it comes to addressing a student concern, or student-to-student concern, or a classroom dynamic. And just kind of looking at that and thinking about that, you're like, dang, there is a lot that teachers would need to learn and gain in order to do that well. The first step, though, is if you had a little bit of a awareness of this UAI framework and start trying it, you're probably going to gain some skills, because I don't think anyone can say there's a playbook to give you all of these things anyway. But it's a lot of practice that's needed to do this. And we went through a couple behavioral scenarios and recognized, like, we do this sometimes, but there are probably a lot more opportunities we can think about this. And so this is another like capacity building thing that I recognize our teachers are going to need a lot of professional development and training. And I bring this up because if you aren't really fluent or capable in the UAI framework or understanding the balance in the process, and then I ask you to run a restorative circle as a whole class, or run a restorative circle around 2 students that are struggling, it's not going to go very well for anybody. And so really, I think these two things are the underpinning of what it means to be a restorative practitioner, and what would if you are acting upon these two approaches in a day, and we all are, then we're doing restorative practices. It's not just the circle. The circle is just one of those tools through which we can do a lot of this work. All right, we can bounce back to the PowerPoint, and I'll maybe speed through. How long have I been going for?
If you
Going long?
Yeah.
You want me to ramp it up?
No. You're not going long. It's just we got about
Covered a
20
lot.
minutes left before we start getting to the witching hour, where people want to get out of
Lynn
here.
always knows you can't give me control of the mic.
You're doing great.
All right, so I'll speed up. So another thing, so we said what's next is plan, scope, and sequence for PD around all these things. And I also think when we start doing that, we're going to realize it might be a whole year really on the balancing process work, or it might be a whole year on the understanding the UAI framework. So we could, again, make some big dreams and have to pull those back a bunch based on what we think is appropriate. And the real goal, kind of all of this, is what is the first step in foundational learning we need all of our teachers to have, and then move on from there so that we can be all effective and competent. And then we'll review our assets and needs assessment plan for 22-23 between now and the start of next year. So another thing we want to do is train new teachers and staff in an intro to RP, and I think we might, based on this year's learning, change what that intro to RP looks like. But we did do that this year. We're planning on doing it again next year, and recognizing we probably need to think about those new staff that were hired later on in the year this year probably need to go to the new staff next year training. So the assets and need assessment, we realize this is something we want to postpone to next year. So we can do that slide quick. The evaluation systems piece, we realize we're totally not ready for that. That's something that can come up as we feel like we're actually implementing restorative practices. There could be some opportunities though when we start implementing some PD around balance of the process. Maybe we can create some tools that can allow us to evaluate and reflect and gain in that capacity. Or if we do the understanding of the UAI framework, maybe there's a tool we can use to start building some feedback loops for teachers to revise and learn their practices. But the bigger goal of like implementation systems, processes, and fidelity checks is something that's going to wait until we feel like we actually can even say we're really starting to implement. So this was actually the heart of, I would say, what we did as sort of restorative practices implementation this year. And I liked it. It revealed a lot to us as a restorative practice team and the consultant and myself. Is the middle school team had some concerns around some universal social, emotional, behavioral issues in their classrooms. And we had actually piloted this once with our current 6th grade in 5th grade and found you can leverage circles to do some social emotional learning. And the middle school team kind of was like, let's pilot this. And as they kind of started piloting it, we started learning a scope and sequence for professional development around using circles, and realized those underpinnings of balancing the process and understanding awareness and intention were also missing and can make it really hard to do this. But there might be a way to kind of gain capacity without going through some deep PD on that. And we create a scope and sequence of learning for the teachers to do circles through first starting with this process called check-ins, where we kind of get together, get a circle, get kids comfortable being in a circle, get kids comfortable with some of the expectations of being in a circle, and just do some simple check-ins. And from there, teachers started building their capacity, students started building their capacity, and then we could maybe deliver some planned, dedicated social emotional learning based on a need in that space. And so that's what's been ongoing in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And the 3-4 team's like, oh, this sounds kind of awesome. I want to try this out. And so they're going to start piloting it. And so what's happening here is an organic process, and it was kind of my hope anyway, where the school will eventually become a school where everyone's doing restorative practice circles or something like that. And a great opportunity we're seeing is how we can bring social emotional learning instruction into the classroom through the circles in a targeted, meaningful way. So that's kind of what's next, as I just said, so we can keep moving. And I should be getting close to this. Again, so that initiatives, that policy review work, that's postponed until we feel like we have got a foundational learning as a school, and we've done some foundational learning in a community before we start talking about changing our actual behavioral practices or changing policy, and that also would be something done at the SU level as well. And next slide. And I think I'm almost done. Yeah, then we're just going to continue those practices and continue that consultation. And so this is kind of a summary of it. If you'd like to look at it, I don't think I need to rephrase it all again, but there's basically a lot of the takeaways really are it takes a lot of work and learning to do restorative practice as well. And every time we take a bite of the apple, we realize we need to take an even smaller bite of the apple. But it seems to so far have been going well for those middle school teachers. And this goes back to my really previous point. When we started doing the circles, something really interesting has been happening. And I'm going to say interesting, I'm not going to say bad, but there are some really big, like, fight or flight responses for some of our students when we get into a circle. And we say, we're going to talk about, and we don't even say, like, we're going to talk about our feelings, but they sense, like, they're bringing in all this history with their peers and all their history outside of school, and they're intentionally sabotaging the circle or getting themselves in trouble to get out of it. And they're saying things like, I hate the circles are stupid. And we talk more and more about it. What you can see is going on is they have this real disconnect. Some of them's like, I don't want to be friends with my classmates. I'm like, well, that's kind of part of the problem. That's why we're having this conversation. So it's really been profound to see that and recognizing how taxing that is for the teacher to try and run a circle when students are feeling that uncomfortable with it, that uncomfortable with talking about your feelings, talking about how I could be more successful as a peer, talking about how we could be more successful as a group, that it's that traumatizing or triggering for them that they act out in really inappropriate ways just to get out. Speaks volumes to how far we are away from that connectedness that we need, and also speaks volumes to, again, how important and necessary this work is.
Lenny, are these slides something that you can send out to the board?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Lenny,
for
I
the
think your
update.
point too is we don't know the trauma that kids come with. And it could be just a small thing to us, but it's big to them.
Okay.
Do you do work on restorative language too with your teachers on a daily basis of how they speak to their students on a regular basis?
That will be one of the PDs. We haven't dove too deeply into it, but we do have all our teachers trained in responsive classroom, and that is very similarly aligned as far as the phrases you use.
Because that's when we first started in Bakersfield, we had to step back because we went into circles and then realized it really was that restorative language that needed to be there first.
Well, thank you so much, Lenny.
And my apology, I didn't think it was going to go nearly as long as it did. I thought I was like, oh, this is pretty quick. Well, sorry.
I think it's good.
All good.
Like,
All good.
no, it's a good indication of like it's deep work.
Yeah.
We can't just gloss over it. It is. So that was important.
And I was
Thank
glad to
you.
hear the piece that the new teachers coming in will be brought up. Because otherwise you step in and it's like, everybody else knows what's going on, but I'm lost. Yeah.
Sustainability planning.
Yeah.
Yep.
Especially with the amount of turnover we have.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Lynn, that brings us to your report.
Okay. So I'm going to start with personnel, and you all have this in your board packets. So I'm not going to go over all of the moves, but what I will do is go to the action items. So the one piece that I have right now for action is I'm going to ask, not because I want to, but because I have to, but to approve Christy Martin's resignation as the principal of Sheldon. That is our only personnel item that requires board action at this meeting. At the end of the school year.
So you need a motion.
Yes.
I can regrettably make that motion.
By roll, Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
and Mary is a yes. Sadly, a yes. We will really miss your wonderful leadership at Sheldon. Thank you so much, Christy. Thank you.
I didn't have a very good lead into that. I think I'm in an all business mode right now. I just want to acknowledge Christy has been in Sheldon for 7 years, and she's done some really great work at Sheldon Elementary School. MVU is very lucky to be getting Christy as their middle school principal. That's a going home kind of place for Christy. I think that she spent a lot of time in her career teaching at MVU. So although we're sad to see her go, we're happy she's staying in the neighborhood. So thank you for your service, Christy. And we'll be talking a little bit later in the meeting about our process for hiring the next principal of Sheldon. So as you can see from your board notes, we have several open positions that we know of already, and I am going to read those in case there's anybody listening that has an interest in coming to work for us. So in Bakersfield, we have first one I'm going to skip. We have a middle school science teacher position open for next year. You had on the list the long-term middle school science substitute teacher. However, we're under contract. Do you want to say anything briefly about that?
Sure, we can. We have a virtual teacher currently, and it's through a company called Elevate. And this has been the first week that our middle schoolers have had that teacher, and it's going fabulously. I'm really impressed. They've had a lot of kind of back and forth, free time to study hall time to all kinds of chaos time. And you go in that classroom and they are sitting and watching that screen and listening and doing some great science stuff. So it's pretty cool to see.
So we really struggled to find, we had a teacher break contract after the February break. So we were unsuccessful in finding a long-term substitute to fill that role. Given that it was through the end of the year, it did not make sense for us to put an unlicensed person in there. Because we'd have to do 30 days and then move on to another unlicensed person for 30 days. So this is a company that I actually found at a national conference recently. So it's something that we were interested in exploring given the staffing shortages that we're navigating. And this was a perfect opportunity for us to pilot. So you can expect we'll have some more information as we go through the year. So we have in Bakersfield also open for next year an upper elementary teacher and an elementary teacher. At Berkshire right now we have a paraeducator and a behavior technician. At Montgomery we have an elementary teacher and a 0.4 FTE librarian. At Sheldon we have a paraeducator, a long-term elementary teacher sub. Chrissy, do you still have that, or is that's old at this point? Okay. And
Yeah, that's all.
A 1-year middle school ELA teacher for next year. For next year, we also have a pre-K teacher, a grade 5 teacher, a math coach, and an elementary school principal. We have a request of the board from a Sheldon teacher. Her name is Bailey Duforge. I probably didn't say that correctly. Deforge. So Bailey is in her 2nd year. She is about to have a baby, and she has made a request that the board consider allowing her to take a 1-year leave of absence so that she can stay home with her child for this first year. So the board, if you're going to consider that, we'd be looking for a motion if that's something that you want to approve for Bailey.
And I'm assuming, but just for the record, this is a 1-year unpaid leave of absence.
1 year totally unpaid.
Yeah.
But her position would be available to her to return to next year.
Yeah.
A position would be available in her licensure area.
Okay. And we have certainly done that for other people. There's long precedence for a move like that.
Yes.
Any discussion from folks? So I'll make the motion to approve her 1-year unpaid leave of absence. By roll, Lisa?
Yes.
Kat?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Arlene?
Yes.
Miranda? Oh,
Sorry.
and Mary is a yes. Okay.
Can I bring up a question since this has already been approved? So that's now 2 approvals of teachers on paid leave. Is there a point at which we might start saying we can only have so many in a building at once? And I don't know if this conversation, maybe I don't even want to go policy, but
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
you know,
I don't know that I feel like this I'm not sure why, but what my experience has been in the last few years, there are more people who are accessing this in Sheldon. I think it's more of a historically something that has happened in Sheldon. Have we ever had two, Christy, in 1 year?
Yes. I think it was the first year that we merged, we had two.
Okay. So it is particularly, I hear where you're going, Erin, because I'm about to talk to you in a little bit about the landscape for hiring new teachers. So it is very, very tricky right now. So I think that if we were faced with another one, we definitely need to have that be a part of the conversation, and maybe proactively thinking forward to the future about
Like that's a
if
huge
then,
detriment to.
right? Anything else on that?
No, motion approved.
So quickly, just in terms of COVID, we have shifted out of the pandemic response place, and we are in an endemic response. So almost all of our mitigation measures are no longer in place. Effective Monday of this week, the Agency of Education and the Department of Health expressed that all of the testing programs were concluded. So the testing programs that were still viable for us was our staff assurance testing program and our test at home program for students. However, they gave us an option in the communication that we could continue to offer those testing materials to our families. So we are choosing to continue to make those available through the same process where people could sign up or call in and ask for testing kits. The shift at the state level is test kits now are going to be distributed at what was previously the testing sites where you could drive up and get your PCR test. Now you can drive up and you could get take-home kits. I think you can get 6 or 8 take-home kits or a lamp test, and the change is you have to make an appointment to go do that. One of the things that was important for us is access, because we live we're so remote here, and there are not a lot of testing sites. Families were struggling to find testing sites. So as long as the state's going to continue to provide us with those testing resources, we're very committed to wanting to make those available to all of our families, because we know we have families that, one, gas is very expensive right now for those families on a fixed income, and two, we have families without transportation in general. So for purposes of equity, we will continue on, and our nurses were very much in favor of doing that. I'm going to talk just about teacher, staff recruitment, and retention for a moment. So as you all remember, we had a strategy session around teacher, staff recruitment and retention at our February board meeting. And we went into executive because we were talking about money issues, we were talking about negotiations and things like that. So at that meeting, you approved each of the 2 district boards and the FNESU board approved offering a $2 wage increase to all of our support staff for the next school year beginning on July 1. And also to change the placement grid that we have for hiring new support staff and increasing that placement grid by $2 across the board. So we would take our placement from $13 an hour to $15 an hour to be more competitive in terms of some of the other local businesses who are hiring. So at tonight's meeting, I'm asking that the board approve formally approving the side letter that indicates what I just said to you, and granting Mary authority to sign that side letter on behalf of the board.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. By roll, Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Miranda, and Mary is a yes.
So you should have received from VSBA a legislative update. It was either yesterday or today. There are just a couple pieces I want to pull out and draw your attention to. One is around Senate Bill S-287, pupil weighting talked a lot about that over the last couple of years. One of the things that's happening right now is they're contemplating a shift away from weights and towards a model that's called the cost equity payment model. And it's still, in terms of what that does for us in terms of tax capacity, it's still it's favorable for us in terms of the communities that we serve. It's still based on, your cost equity model is based on similar equity standards that the weights are based on. So know that debate is happening in the legislative session right now. There's also conversation around weighting. There was a 5-year kind of onboarding of the weighting process, and I know that one of the things in the update that they talked about, and didn't see it in the written blog, but I did hear it in the podcast, that they're considering potentially shortening the onboard from a 5-year rollout to a 3-year rollout. So that's new information and something to pay attention to. There's an act that I haven't really spoken to you about, and it's relating to amending the prohibitions against discrimination. And all of our state organizations have been advocating about the way in which the revisions are proposed. This would be, there are significant concerns about the responsibilities that this would place on schools with these changes. And it looks like Lisa wants a little update, to give me a little update on that one.
Thank you, Lynn. That bill is in my committee, and as of this morning, Attorney Heather Lynn testified, and the current version, which I think is draft 5.1 of that bill, has completely removed any reference to schools and other places of public accommodation. So if this language is enacted somewhere, it would have to be in a different bill, because this bill didn't make crossover. So it can't be a standalone bill. But if it is enacted in any other piece of legislation, it will not affect what schools, school boards, principals, superintendents do in your daily work.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. There's a universal school meals bill that I think no one's really going to argue that it would be great if we could feed our children. The thing that is debatable about this bill is how do we fund it, and bringing it out of the education fund and having it be tied to what we're already spending in that fund is the part that people are objecting to. So I know that the legislators are working really hard to figure out whether or not there are alternative revenue sources in order to get that bill through. There's a lot of discussion about public funds for tuition, and some of this is connected to religious schools. And under the bill that's in the Senate right now, a private school must do 3 things in order to receive public tuition money. And that would be to agree not to use the public tuition money for direct instruction around religious instruction, agree to comply with the anti-discrimination laws, and accept students with IEPs. And that is not something that they have ever had to do before. So another change in this bill about using public money for tuition is about the where you can take those dollars. So currently, and this is information for this board, because you see our tuition bills and you see how far away some of those people take the tuition money. So this bill contemplates that it would be limited to states that border Vermont or schools that are located in Quebec. There's a carve out that would cover the Stansted provision for some of the northern tier communities, and choosing that as a choice option. So that's embedded in that bill. We're watching where that goes. One of the last things I want to talk to you about, and I have not brought it to board members yet, is PCB testing. There's quite a lot of work that's happening in the legislature that's facilities driven, and these are things that we need to pay attention to, especially in NMV, if we're thinking about the age of our school buildings. So right now there is a proposal that to push back the deadline for testing for PCBs to 2026. So we have several of our schools that kind of fall within that construction window of time where PCBs could have been used in the construction of our buildings. So what we know, and it's been very public about Burlington High School and closing Burlington High School. Since that happened, the allowable level of PCBs has changed. It's not quite as low of a bar as it was before. So those are things you just need to be aware of, that's on the horizon. The other piece of this is testing for radon, and there's a proposal to push that back also to 2026, because there is no, at this time, remediation money associated with any findings of this testing. And so as we move forward with the PCB testing, and we're going to have to figure out as a state how we contend with systems who will test positive for PCBs, and what do we do about schools that can no longer have children in them while they're remediated. So that is something for us to pay attention.
And Lynn,
to.
the change in the threshold for the PCBs, this is based on actual health science, and
I can't speak to that, Mary. I don't know. I mean,
sounds like an interesting moving of the goalposts.
Well, even moving it down the day, like, it's like 2 years of, if you've got a level that's not acceptable, and we've got kids sitting in those buildings.
Is that something that we could forge ahead with testing, or we are confined by the state process and timeline if we felt like, wow, wouldn't we want to know before 2026 if our children and our teachers and our staff are inside buildings where they're being exposed to hazardous levels of PCBs?
We need a budget to go with it, though.
I think ethically, I totally understand where you're coming from, and at the same time, I think there's a reason that they're pushing this out to be able to really think through strategically what kind of response would we have if this, and they're trying to navigate whether or not there's going to be funding associated with the remediation. There's also a piece, and I don't know, Lisa, if you've been closely connected to this, but I know that there are some changes recently that have come up in terms of the Department of Environmental Conservation and their connection around communication with this. I think it's this bill.
Yeah, I have not had any experience with this bill. The only thing I know is what I've read in the press. So you probably know more than I do. And I'm not even sure the number of this bill. It wasn't listed on the VSBA with a number. So
It's in S283.
Okay, so that's miscellaneous. That's in the miscellaneous ed bill. So my guess is they're just going to be, as you said, pushing out the deadline, and there probably won't be any other substantive changes. Because I don't think they would put it in the miscellaneous ed bill if it was something more substantive than that. But I could be wrong. I can take a quick look while you're talking just to see what I can see.
Not in the summary, in terms of the levels, that's done. That isn't connected to this bill.
Okay.
If I'm thinking about the lead in the drinking water, there was a difference between what the Environmental Protection Agency's acceptable level was and Vermont's acceptable level. And my suspicion is the change has to do with the difference between the two here. Have I done the work to unpack why they came to that? I have not. It's certainly something that we could look at. I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
I have not dug deeply into it, but that was my understanding around Burlington, was that the state of Vermont had put a higher standard out that was not supported federally.
So I think we're back to the place where we're following the federal standard and not Vermont's.
I think that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and Lynn, just a quick look at that bill. It doesn't have any language in the copy that I'm looking at, so it's got to be something that's being marked up in committee that I have not seen or can't get access to right now.
Okay. I don't have any of that information. I just have it in summary. It definitely says Senate. It's added to the Senate miscellaneous ed bill. So that's what I have under legislative update. So unless there are any questions, I'll move on to Sheldon principal hiring. So I just want to talk through briefly the timeline. So we're in the process. We have a screening committee who's working. Miranda's a part of the screening committee, as is Emily. 12 members, 14, 12? Between 12 and 13 members. I can't remember exactly how many we have, but we're in the ballpark. We've had our first meeting. We're meeting again on Friday. We are interviewing 6 candidates. We had 8 people apply, and there was interest in learning more about 6 of them. So they're really digging in, and they're going to be doing the hard work of sorting for you as a board. So they will, after Friday, have a list of candidates that they believe should be moved forward to the final round. It will my charge for them is it has to be more than 1, and not more than 3 that we're moving through to a final round with the board. So the timeline that I had sent out to you shows you that we've tried to condense the process because of where we are in the school year and trying to get ahead. We know that some people are under contract and they will not be able to finish this out if we drag this too long, because most people who are already administrators must resign within 90 days of the end of the school year. So we've made a condensed process. We have the final interviews, like I said, on Friday, and then on April 14th, that will be the school board meeting next week, where you will have the opportunity to meet the finalists. There will be forums for community members and staff and teachers and students that will occur on that same night. We are doing all kinds of surveys so that people will be able to give stakeholder feedback. You'll be able to look that night at data from your screening committee and from everyone who participated in the forums. In addition to that, we have a staff member and we will need a school board member to participate in site visits for our finalists. It's possible that some of those will be physically in-person site visits, or it could be that they are virtual site visits. We do have a candidate that does not live in the US, so that one definitely will be virtual. So I'm looking for a volunteer from the board to participate in site visits, and that will happen. We'll mutually agree on a schedule between April 11th and the 14th, completing those site visits and talking with stakeholders in each of the finalists' school communities.
What day would you want the site visits to be? Lynn?
It will be mutually agreed upon between the board member and the teacher who will be joining.
Okay. And they're going to be in, do we know where geographically?
Not yet.
Okay.
Could be in person, could be virtual, it's too far away.
Yeah. And the purpose of the site visit is to see the person in their current work environment?
And to speak with stakeholders in that environment to
Okay.
get a sense of their perception of the finalist.
I think, I mean, I can't guarantee. I could do Wednesday the 13th. I can be available on Wednesday the 13th, but I would not be able to be available on Thursday or Friday. Maybe someone else who has all 3 days available, or maybe we could find someone. I mean, I think it's asking a lot for someone to have like all day open on 3 days of the week.
Yeah, it has to happen in that window.
Yeah.
So it could be that the teacher has flexibility.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
Yeah.
So the intention would be that we would make it work between the two schedules.
Right.
Is
Well,
there
maybe
any-
you could get a little like tally of who could do, I could do Wednesday, the 13th. And is there anyone that would be able to be available if it needs to be on the Thursday, the 14th or Friday, the 15th?
I wish I could. We don't need subs.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing is that we're really gonna aim for April 13th. And maybe I have to switch teachers if I can't make that.
Yeah.
work. Okay. So the other piece of this is I'll be looking for someone from the board. This is less urgent because I can carry this myself if I need to, but what we have done in the past is we have had a board representative help with reference checks as well, so that we can go a little more deeply with checking references. So if there's an interest from a board member to help with that, if not, I have a pretty solid process for getting feedback from stakeholders, and I'll report all of that out to the board.
I can help with that. I did it the last go round. I mean, that I can do from the comfort of my home on the phone. So I'm happy to help with that. And Lynn, do you know what date the final all board interview is going to be? Because I want to get that on my calendar now.
Yeah, you should have received it in what went out with the finalized timeline. It's the 14th, Mary, and it's from 5 to 7.
Oh, the 14th of April.
5 to 7.
Next
It's
week.
April 14th. It's next week.
Oh.
It begins at 5, and we don't know what time it'll end because we don't know if you're going to have 2 or 3 candidates.
Ah, okay.
Lynn, I don't think I'm available. I just want to put that out there now. I might have missed that email. Sorry.
Miranda is telling me that she didn't get it either. It could have been me that missed it.
We have the survey one, but I don't remember getting a timeline.
Okay, well, I'm going to give it all to you right now.
I can be there. It doesn't help in person, but there's a forum.
You should all have it now.
Where's the start of
You just did you just resend the timeline,
Yes.
Lynn? Okay, thank you.
So
Okay.
would we have a quorum for that night?
So Arlene and I, you don't think you can?
I mean, I work on Thursdays, but I can try to swap. I would like to
Not a
be
Thursday.
there. I wish it was not on Thursday, but I will do my best. I would like to be there.
John?
What time is it?
You start at 5.
No, I can't. I work until 8 Thursday. Next Thursday, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And is it in person only, Lynn?
We could have you come in virtually, Lisa.
I will try. And Lynn, I know I let you know, but I'm going to be in Florida next week. But if you end up needing me, you know, I can attend virtually, probably. Maybe.
So,
This is not making me feel very confident.
so this is not a really like. I mean, I don't relish the idea of giving up a whole evening of good paid work, but I'm willing to do it if it has to be on the 14th.
The issue with if it's not on the 14th is you're going into the vacation week, and we're gonna lose
Yeah.
people, and we're gonna lose candidates. So we were trying to get this done before we go into the vacation week. So their interviews with the committee are on the 8th. So I would be able to notify finalists on the 8th that evening, or the 9th in the morning. So we were also trying to give them a respectable amount of time
Yeah.
to be able to prepare for a final round interview. And I believe we have something else. 13th.
And we can't do it on the 13th. On Wednesday, or Friday the 15th. I know Friday nights.
I can't actually do the Friday the
Yeah.
15th.
Oh, and actually, I'm seeing this is the first night of Passover, so that I'm not gonna be
If we absolutely can't get a quorum for the 14th and have to move it to the 13th, I think we could try to make it work. Does that make a difference to people if it's on the 13th?
That makes a difference for me.
Aaron?
It doesn't make a difference for me. One is probably not any better than the other for me.
It does for me because we're going to be traveling Thursday from one part to another part of the state. So I just don't know what time I'll be getting in, if I could even hop on at 5. So Wednesday, I more likely could.
Arlene, Aaron?
Both are good.
Was that a yes for you, Aaron?
Yeah.
What about you, Aaron?
I have a current conflict, so I just-
And John, how about you?
I'm working that day.
Same. Okay.
I know.
My schedule rotates.
Yeah.
12 hours.
Oh, I got it. No worries.
So I just want to confirm this because we do not want to bring these candidates in and not have
Yeah.
a quorum. So if we shifted it to Wednesday, I would have Mary, Kat, Arlene, Aaron, Miranda, for sure.
Yes. I can commit to Wednesday. I cannot commit to Thursday.
And I don't know about Emily. If we kept it to as scheduled, we would have Aaron, Arlene, maybe Mary, maybe Lisa, maybe Miranda, maybe Kat. I feel like we have to move
Yeah.
to the 13th. Okay.
It's not scheduled yet, so I'm already behind the 8 ball.
And we're hosting these, sorry, I'm sure you probably already said it. It's just late.
At Sheldon.
At Sheldon, okay.
Yeah, I'll need a Zoom option. So if you can send it to me, I will try to be available. I know there's something else that night, but I don't know what it is.
We'll make sure that we send that out. So we do have to review the board interview questions. We could do this one of two ways. I know we're at a late hour at this point. I could send these to you virtually. You could put some notes in there. I have a draft template for you to consider. You can put some notes in there. I can make some revisions based on your notes, and then I could schedule the first interview at 5:30 instead of 5 so that you could finalize your interviews on that night, or your interview questions on that night. Does that work?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And so that gets me to the end of mine.
Okay, super. Thanks, Lynn. Okay, so that brings us to principal reports. Rhoda, do you have anything that you'd like to highlight or add to your report?
I don't think so. I think we've got everything on there.
Great, thank you. Lenny, anything to add or highlight?
It wasn't put in for this round because I hadn't got the quote yet from Vern, but I asked Vern to look and getting a quote for the fence around our playground, of the new preschool playground, because that's the next step that needs to be done. And way back when, Emily Grimm's had done a lot of the work to do the grant funding, and there was some matching, and we found a way to make this all happen. That was, I know, it was
right.
it was a while ago.
Wow, yeah.
So I did talk to Emily Grimm's to kick the tires on, see if there are any possible grants out there, and she was like, at this time seems like nothing. And then I'm gonna probably see what kind of magic Vern can pull off. And then I've had a couple conversations with Morgan about what are some potential options for us to see if we need to or could maybe use local funds or some amount of local funds to get this put in. It isn't necessarily a must do, but it is definitely a should do. And maybe something like, and I don't know if this is where we'll go, but maybe something like using capital reserve funds to complete that project. But I'm going to talk to Vern about first see if there are any grants available, and then have that conversation. Are there other things in the works for investments too that would necessitate us having to wait a little while on putting in the fence?
So could you come back to the board in May, Lenny, and let them know what you worked through with Burn and
Yep.
whether or not there's an ask of capital
Yep.
reserve. Okay.
So it's kind of just tipping you to
Yeah.
that. We're looking into it. We're do some other things first, but we may be coming back to that. But
And I thought it was like legally by the state that we were required to have the play areas fenced
For preschool.
for the tiny kids.
So there is a fence requirement, and at the same time, the fence that we have out on that playground currently met their expectations, and it did not go all the way around because we were able to get that approved. So I don't know what it would be because it's pretty far from the road where
Okay.
he has it now. So
yeah, and so I think we're like not in any sort of hot water around that, and that probably would have changed things multiple years ago if
Sure.
that were the case. But at the same time, it's definitely the right thing to do for some safety measures, particularly like we know little ones can move very quickly. So if you're
Yes.
looking the other way, you're down your cell phone, and all of a sudden they're they're somewhere they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So there's that piece too. We wanted to have that kind of set up for just general safety as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. Sounds like a good plan. Sandy, nice to see you virtually.
You too.
Do you have anything that you wanted to add to or highlight from your report?
Nope, not tonight. Thank you.
All right. And Christy, anything that you'd like to highlight or add to your report?
No, I don't think so. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I know it's getting on there, so I'll try to be concise here, heading into our board business. Anyone have any particular agenda items that they can think of in the moment? Always time to add at a later date, of course. Let's see. Lynn, I think I'll do a negotiations update at the very end.
okay.
I'm gonna go ahead. It's time to talk about our teacher staff appreciation. Lynn and I chatted a little bit about it last week, and we thought perhaps it's time to kind of shift back to doing something that is supports our local businesses and the communities, as opposed to the darn tough arrangement was great, and especially for during COVID, those years, it made a lot of sense when people weren't out as much and weren't enjoying our local restaurants and so on and so forth. So, but I'm open. I'd love to hear what people might like to do. Move it for this year that isn't darn tough. I may have worn out my welcome with them. It was great while it lasted.
So you're looking for
In the past, I mean, I have to say, I don't know as a merged board if we've yet done one that isn't the SOC
I don't think you have.
thing. So just to, historically, when we were kind of standalone districts, when I was on the Montgomery board, what we would do was a gift certificate to a local business, and we would try to kind of rotate it to kind of, spread it out amongst our different restaurants and Sylvester's and the Belfry and so on and so forth. Now as merged, we could do something where we're on a kind of 4-year plan, and we pick one in each community to support. I don't know. It raises a couple of questions, because we also had this issue, right, where we were talking when we landed on the darn tough, where we don't necessarily want to force someone from Sheldon to drive all the way to Montgomery necessarily to enjoy something that came from a Montgomery business. So I don't know. There's
You also could consider just the being united in the amount and then differentiate by community for the business.
Yep.
So that your teachers in Montgomery, if they had time, could run down to Bernie's for lunch.
Totally.
And if they're in Berkshire, they could go to the Phoenix House.
Yep.
Or to the Pine Cone.
Yep.
So you could think of it that way. I don't know where they're going in Bakersfield.
There is it.
Well, I mean, the Westman's just opened up there.
They
Oh, that
did just
is true.
open,
You're right.
Snack shop. It's not a
but you
restaurant.
who knows for how long.
Is there? Just be nice to bring them all together. Is there a time when the staff are all coming back together at the end of the year?
We don't know yet.
Can we bring food to them?
Well, would you like to talk about that, or would you like me to talk about that?
No, you do the honors.
So, I worked with Mary, and the other board had made a decision to feed the teachers before we go. They had asked me to do it in March, and I could not pull it together in March. So I talked with Mary and said we didn't do this at the board level, but I'd really like to do it for the NMV as well. So she agreed that we could go ahead. We had the money already embedded in your budget. So next, might need help, Morgan. This Friday and next Monday, all of our schools are receiving a catered lunch for all staff from the dairy center. So we had to spread it across 2 dates because we have some schools with ski dates. So they're going to receive a really nice catered lunch from Lise and appreciation from both boards. So not that they all have lunch at the same time, but the food is coming to them.
And so this is just an addition to, this is just a nice way to celebrate, and then something additional for our annual teacher and staff appreciation. So, well, we could we could settle on an amount, and then, which I think, with the socks, I think, what did we end up, Erin, do you remember?
It was
20 per person. Well, maybe, do we want to just maybe table this, and like a couple of us off of, like, not quorum number could maybe just kind of flush this out in the next couple days, if the board would entrust us to kind of come up with, I'm just sensing it's 9 and people seem tired, and we're not getting a lot of ideas in the moment. So, and I keep looking at you, Erin. I'm like, you and I, maybe we chat and come up with a good idea.
Lots of ideas. I also had wondered, and it's too late right now maybe, but I know in the past years when we have done that, we've gone down the list and gotten everybody's requests and put the orders in, and then the question came up, well, what about the SU employees? And we took care of them, we want to make sure to take care of them. So maybe this conversation is more of an SU discussion. How do we celebrate all of our teachers? And so that becomes then like a universal, they're all, celebrated equitably, and we're not trying to figure out, well, this teacher's in this building and then they're in this building, and are we celebrate them all? But yes, I would love to sit down and chat with you about.
All right.
I got kind of all kinds of ideas.
All right, and Lynn, maybe we'll pull you in too, the 3 of us.
Okay.
And if everyone feels okay letting us kind of make that executive decision, after we talk on behalf of the boards. Okay. So we can connect the 3 of us and we'll figure it out. Okay. So as far as the SU board representative report, we haven't had another meeting because we did not have a March meeting for the SU board. So I feel as though the last report we gave is the most recent one because we've been so deep in negotiations.
You had a February 29th.
Exactly. And I think we already shared everything that was discussed. That was the big transportation study and some of the MTSS stuff that Jody had presented, I think. And so, Lisa, I don't have anything new to report, and everyone else. I mean, other than you did write out, you sent out the SU up your SU update on the 28th, I think. I don't know if that had any new, and that was talking about the board work.
Oh,
The
communication,
goals,
yes.
and yes.
Yeah, that was outside of board, but it was communicating with all of our stakeholders.
Yeah.
That has not, just so you know, it hasn't been put into a version yet for families because there's some background building I need to do for that. So it's been for our educators and for board members, ACC board members.
Okay. All right. Well, so more coming on that
Yes.
down the line. Okay. So our next meeting, May 4th. Okay, and then that brings us to the negotiations update. And so we have not yet reached an agreement with the teachers and the union. I'm absolutely optimistic that we will, and I think it's been a positive experience so far. We just still have some kind of to get over the finish line here with it. And I think one of the things that those of us on the negotiation committee have really wanted to communicate to our teachers is just our real deep appreciation for them, and that in what we are offering, we believe reflects kind of our appreciation, our understanding, especially of how challenging the last couple of years have been, and how everyone has kind of really risen to the challenge. We've done that, we are showing that not only in the offer that we are presenting the union, but also other ways with the bonuses that we have already, given to our teachers. So I'm optimistic that we're going to find a good place to meet around the negotiations. I wish I could say that we were totally done with it. One of the things that remains front and center for us is understanding that we need to be regionally competitive, and that, this board has talked a lot about it, and as has the SU board, that teacher kind of attracting and retaining are kind of front and center for us. And we're ever mindful when we're kind of talking through the negotiations and what we are offering, that we want to raise our base up and give a good kind of salary structure and be competitive with the other districts and SUs around us. So that is informing a lot of what we're doing at the negotiation table. And I think we've made tremendous strides over the last couple years. I mean, this has been many years in the making, that we're trying to be competitive, attract people to want to come work in our schools, live in our communities, and stay for the long run, because we all know how challenging that teacher turnover can be. So that continues to be one of the driving factors in how we kind of come to the negotiation table, in really, in good faith, and with those really strong intentions, and with packages that honor how much we value our teachers in this SU. So again, I'm really optimistic that we'll get there. And Lynn has some things to kind of bring us up to date as far as details.
I am going to purposely refer to my notes just so that we, I'm careful with the pieces that we communicate in detail about. So I just want to remind board members that in February, when we broke off into that executive session discussion, the board worked on goals. And we talked about ways in which we want to center our work on both recruiting and retaining substitute teachers, our support staff, our teachers, and our leaders. What we know is that school systems across the country, probably the world, definitely hearing a lot about it in Vermont, we're all contending with a workforce shortage. There are not as many teachers as there once were. There are not as many people going into the profession, and there are not as many people remaining in the profession for the same number of years that we used to have. We're also contending with a time and a place in education where we're, as a group, we're facing greater challenges in our systems than we've ever faced before. The board is well aware of that reality and how important it is to recruit and retain our staff. So the board has really worked, and Mary's tipped this already, on looking at comparison data and looking at how we relate to the surrounding systems in terms of how we compensate our educators. So we have centered our analysis on systems that are directly around us. So we've looked deeply at Franklin, Grand Isle, Lamoille, Orleans, Caledonia, and it's a really important priority of the board negotiation team to work hard to offer a more regionally competitive wage for our educators. So board members and administrators are not allowed to talk about the process with individual teachers. If asked, because that you were in this process, we'd all hoped to be in agreement at this point, and we're not yet. Principals have been told to redirect their questions from teachers to their union representative team, the negotiating team. Similarly, members of the union negotiating team are not allowed to contact individual board members directly about the process or the details of negotiations. Both sides are allowed to share the information that was shared in open session directly with their own constituencies. So the board and the union negotiating team have met 3 times now. At the end of the final session, we agreed that we would need some outside help to kind of get across that finish line and come to the final agreement. There was no animosity, there was no unpleasantness that we felt during that negotiation process. We felt like we worked really hard, really collaboratively toward our mutual goal of a new and fair contract for our teachers. So to recap those 3 meetings, in the first round, I'm going to go through the 3 sessions and talk through a summary of those rounds. So in the first meeting, the union's first offer, they offered a 2-year deal, which added added $4,100 to the base in year 1 and $2,500 to the base in year 2, which would ending at $46,850 as our starting wage for teachers. And teachers would get 1 step in each of those years. So we calculated the new money request to be 11.5% in year 1, 6.5% in year 2, with each teacher receiving between $4,100 and $9,425 of new money in year 1, and between $3,000 and $4,050 in new money in year 2. The union asked for 1 additional personal day, more steps on the grid, more money for teachers on higher steps, more prep time, fewer duties, and other language changes. The board's first offer. The board first offered a 3-year deal, which added $1,350 to the base in year 1, $750 to the base in year 2, $500 to the base in year 3, ending at $42,850 to the base. Teachers would get 1 step for each year. The new money would have equaled 4.7% in year 1, 3.3% in year 2, and 2.7% in year 3, with each teacher receiving between $1,350 and $2,700 in new money in year 1, and between $750 and $2,100 in new money in year 2, between $500 and $1,850 in new money in year 3. The board asked for an additional workday and proposed other language changes. In the second round, the union brought forward the same first offer, but added a 3rd year for 10% new money. They did not detail how that new money would be divided up among teachers, and they also added a few new language changes. The board's second offer. The board proposed a 3-year deal, which added $2,600 to the base in year 1, $2,100 to the base in year 2, and $1,700 to the base in year 3, ending our teachers with a base salary of $46,650. The step values on the grid were reduced to $1,000, and every teacher got a step each year, with multiple steps given to most teachers in year one. The new money would have equaled 5.9% in year one, 5% in year two, and 4% in year three, with each teacher receiving between $2,600 and $3,900 in year one, between $2,100 and $3,100 in year two, and between $1,700 and $2,700 in year three. The board asked for 2 additional work days and agreed to some of the union proposed language changes. In the third round, the union proposed a 3-year deal, which added $3,000 to the base in year one, $3,000 to the base in year two, and $3,200 to the base in year three, ending with a base for teachers at $49,450. Teachers would get 1 step each year. The union added additional steps to the grid and additional money in the master's column, but no change to step value. We calculate the new money to be 7.9% in year one, 7.3% in year two, and 7% in year three, with each teacher receiving between $3,000 and $4,375 in year one, between $3,000 and $4,350 in year two, and between $3,200 and $4,550 in year three. The union proposal included language changes and suggested that they would drop the request for an additional personal day if no additional work days were added to the contract. At this point in the process, there were supposals that were brought back and forth between the two sides. Several proposals were shared between these two parties. So as you know, supposal is a way of floating an idea without making a formal offer. It's frequently used by both sides in a negotiation process. The final 3-year deal shared by the board as a supposal added $2,850 to the base in year one, $2,850 to the base in year two, $3,050 to the base in year three, ending with a teacher starting salary of $49,000. Teachers would get 1 step in year two. The new money would equal 5.4% in year one, 7.1% in year two, and 5.1% in year three, with each teacher receiving $2,850 in new money in year one, and between $2,850 and $4,200 in year two, and $3,050 in new money in year three. The union's proposal suggested a 2-year deal to add $2,100 to the base in year one and $3,150 to the base in year two, with steps given each year for 6.5% and 8% new money. All teachers in year one would receive $3,500, and all teachers in year two would receive $4,550. The board then supposed a 1-year deal to add $3,500 to the base, with no steps given and no language changes. All teachers would get a $3,500 increase for 6.6% new money. The union countered with 7%, a 1-year addition of $3,750 to the base, with no steps and language changes where both sides offer the same changes. The board's final offer. In the board's final proposal that evening, they offered a 1-year deal, hoping to have something approved in time for contract issuance on April 15th. This added $3,750 to the base, with no steps given, giving each teacher a $3,750 increase, with new money that equaled 7.1%. The board proposal included 1 additional workday and no language changes except where both sides offered the same changes. At this point, the union declined to accept or offer a counter, and we decided that no more progress was likely without mediation. So the next step in our process will include a mediation between the board and the union teams. It's taken longer than we would like, but we expect that we will be able to reach an agreement with the help of a neutral third party. If mediation is skipped or it's unsuccessful, The next step will be what's called fact finding. After selecting a fact finding board, both parties would present evidence in support of their position, and the fact finding board would issue a report with recommendations. The recommendations will be largely based on what other districts have done in their negotiations. That report is embargoed for 10 days, giving both sides another opportunity to negotiate. We're confident that we will not need fact finding given the offers that were made in the comparable settlements in the area. If we do go to fact finding, the offers made so far are fair, and there's a risk that the fact finder could recommend less than what we have offered. This is what we have heard about other settlements that have been finalized so far this year. In Missisquoi Valley, we know that their new money, they settled a 3-year contract for 6%, 5%, and 4%, with each teacher receiving between $2,000 and $4,750 of new money in year 1, between $1,200 and $3,300 in new money in year 2, between $1,200 and $3,300 in new money in year 3, and MBU froze steps for all 3 years for teachers at step 11 and higher, and already have a 187-day work year. We're currently at 186. Other Vermont settlements in ratified processes or in the process of being ratified. One system has 4.3, 4.3, and 4.3%. One step granted with the rest onto the base each year, and they still have 2 ratification votes left. Another system is settling at 4.7 and 6.5, one step granted with the rest to the base each year. There are ratification votes left there. Another has settled for 7, 5, and 4.4. One step granted with the rest to the base each year, 185 days in that system, and the board has ratified. Another system just settled. Year 1 was retroactive, so it was for this school year, 3.7%, plus $562 to the base, $643 to the base for next year, and steps given in both years. Another system has settled for 3.25%, with one step granted with $700 to the base. They've also used ESSER money for signing bonuses. They did not do the bonus that you all did, but they're using it for signing their contract and returning it. They're giving a bonus for that. That still needs to be ratified in that community. So, in summary, the board negotiation team is very interested in offering an agreement that's competitive with salaries in the neighboring districts and fair to our existing teachers. Our goals should continue to be focused on attracting and retaining teachers in FNESU. We know there are far fewer people entering the teaching profession, and more is being asked of all our school-based personnel. We're facing a workforce shortage here and across the country, helping to pull we're seeing across the country people being pulled out of teaching. Higher salaries are being offered for people that are willing to go just an hour south of here. And we are really struggling with the housing. We have very limited housing for the new teachers that we're trying to hire. This is coupled with significantly understaffed and under-resourced social services and mental health partners who previously were able to provide more essential support to our neediest students and family. Additionally, there are some students who would historically need more intensive services that were provided than we could provide within our public school system. Those programs now either don't exist anymore or the wait lists are between 1 and 2 years long. So a fair and competitive wage agreement is one of the few levers in our control as we look to staffing our schools over the next few years. So that is the summary of where we are in our negotiation process.
So, yeah, and hopefully we'll have good news soon.
Yes.
On an agreement and our contracts being signed. Okay, anything else, folks? It is really late. I'll make the motion then to adjourn 9:20 by roll. Lisa?
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Miranda, and Mary is a yes. Thank you all so much.